Welcome back to VidZette's podcast. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. It's been a slow news week, and there was almost nothing out there on the health front. So this podcast has been delayed by a day. And suddenly we have the news of President Trump firing FBI Director James Comey. And this is worthy of a bit of consideration, because part of what President Trump declared he would do is to drain the swamp. Now, a lot of people have said, well, the FBI director serves a 10-year term, therefore the president can't fire him until the end of the 10-year term. That's simply incorrect. If we look back at the history of the FBI director, because J. Edgar Hoover served over 40 years, in 1976, by statute, Congress declared that he could not serve more than 10 years. Now, we actually had one who served 12 years after that because there was a circumstance where the Senate specifically acted to confirm him for a bit longer. But basically the idea is that the president appoints someone for a 10-year term, but remember, all appointed federal officials actually serve at the pleasure of the president. 10 years is the target, it's the expected, it's the normal, but it's not a guarantee. Now let's take a look at James Comey so we understand who he is. He was FBI director from September 4, 2013. His history was as a federal prosecutor, and his specific claim to fame was he was special counsel in the Valerie Plame affair. Now, as you'll recall, this is the circumstance where Scooter Libby ultimately was sentenced for lying to the FBI, even though it was known that Valerie Plame had no specific circumstances that were revealed by Scooter Libby. And so, it was one of those things where you have a special prosecutor who has run amok. But he then went into private practice and was chosen by President Obama to serve as the FBI director. At the time, he was hailed as a very impartial, straight arrow kind of guy, and most of us said, okay, we believe that. But if we look at him in fact, in 2005, as a federal prosecutor, he signed a letter that endorsed what's called enhanced interrogation techniques. Those things include waterboarding and sleep deprivation. But in his confirmation hearings in 2013, he said waterboarding is torture and should be one of those things that we just don't do. We also learned that in 2013 he signed an amicus curiae brief that is a friend of the court brief that supported same-sex marriage to the Supreme Court. Now, all of this brings us to the 2016 election cycle. And we already knew about Hillary Clinton's private server. We knew an awful lot about what was on it, the probability that it had been hacked, which now we know is almost a certainty. And we go on and on down the line at that. But early in July, Loretta Lynch, who is the current Attorney General at the time, met with Bill Clinton in Bill Clinton's jet on the tarmac, if memory serves, in Phoenix, Arizona for 30 minutes. This was one of those meetings where there was no witness to tell us what went on. And the public story was, well, we talked about grandkids and all that other thing. I'm sorry, when your Justice Department is investigating the wife of the other party in the conversation, you shouldn't be having the conversation without witnesses. You just don't do it. That's like a doctor going to examine a woman with no nurse in the room to serve as a witness. You just don't do it. But Loretta Lynch, who was always the political animal and never a true attorney general, never a law enforcement officer, did it. Well, Comey decided that that pushed his hand, that he was seeing almost a certain diversion of things so that Bill Clinton would be leaning on Loretta Lynch, and ultimately she would drop whatever prosecution might happen. There could be no honest anything there. So on July 5, he gets up and holds a news conference. This is flat out contrary to everything that is in the principles of the FBI. You never even reveal an investigation. Up until that time, there were reports that there was one, but the FBI had never admitted it. But he revealed that there was an investigation into Hillary Clinton. Then he went on and said the investigation is done. We do not believe that she should be prosecuted. And then he went on to lay out layer after layer of incriminating evidence against her. Basically, he said no prosecution, but his statement was functionally a closing argument for a prosecutor to say, here's all the reasons you should convict her. This is very strange, because if you, according to standard prosecutorial rules, if someone is not going to be prosecuted, you don't publicly release the evidence against them. You just simply say, no, we found no reason to prosecute. End of discussion. And then when he was questioned by Trey Gowdy in Congress on this, he's revealed it, so now it's out in the open. Trey Gowdy hung him out to dry. And in one of VidZette's early videos, we took a look at the list of lies that were involved with Hillary Clinton. But the key point was that every one of these lies showed that Hillary Clinton had very specifically violated our national security and the laws surrounding it. Well, that looked like the end of it until October 28. Now that's 11 days before the election on November 8. Suddenly, because he had already made this first mistake, and he said that he would let Congress know if there was anything else going on, the Anthony Weiner laptop story breaks that the FBI has been looking at Anthony Weiner's laptop, and he's got all of these emails from Hillary to Huma Abedin on his laptop. And now they've got to go through 10,000 emails to see what's going on. So suddenly, we don't think we can finish it before the election. He releases the letter, and this is a double whammy now. You had all the prior evidence, now you got new stuff 11 days before the election, and it may have contributed to Hillary's loss. I mean, there's so many things out there, you can't say one single thing contributed. Robbie Mook at Harvard University declared that our reporting on Hillary's probable Parkinson's disease was a major contributing factor. You know, all of those things add up, and eventually people say we're voting the other way. But one day before the election, he releases a statement that says, we didn't find anything new on that computer, it's over, done. And, well, one day before the election, who knows? People have already made up their minds. All the early voting has gone on. And people are saying Comey should be fired. The guy has totally blown it. He's violated all of the rules of the FBI. He is very clearly not someone who can lead the FBI in the frame of being an impartial law enforcement officer. Well, the president didn't fire Comey. And we go through months of the Trump presidency, and he doesn't fire Comey. Then this last week, Comey once again goes before Congress and basically says, I wouldn't have done anything different. He gets caught in a couple of lies. And then on the 9th of May, that's yesterday, a letter comes out from Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein saying that Comey should be fired. The president receives the letter and fires Comey. Boom. Remember, that 10-year term is not one of those, you can't be fired for 10 years. You still serve at the pleasure of the president. And he displeased the president, and the president said, you can't impartially lead the FBI. You're gone. Now, why did it take this long for this to happen? And most of the news media really doesn't bother to tell you why. As a matter of fact, you look at people like Chuck Schumer, who was claiming that Comey was this horrible person who cost Hillary the election, is suddenly declaring that Comey's firing is covering up the Russia investigation. Well, remember, yes, there's a Russia investigation, but there hasn't been any evidence come forward. None at all of collusion between Trump and Russia. And the FBI would have leaked that out. Remember, the FBI leaks like a sieve. We would have known. So what happened? Well, there are a couple of key facts for us to remember. First of all, Attorney General Sessions, who was approved fairly early on, had already recused himself from the Russia investigation. And because he had said during the campaign that Hillary should be brought up on charges, recused himself from that. So now you don't have a number 2 in the department who can actually do the work. Yes, Sally Yates was momentarily acting Attorney General. She got fired about 2 days later because she wouldn't enforce Trump's executive order on immigration, and now you don't have anybody. Well, Sessions gets confirmed. He can run everything, but there's nobody who hasn't signed off away from the Comey-Clinton affair. Well, on April 25, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is confirmed. On April 26, he is sworn in, and he's sworn in the evening. So now he can start to work on this question. And his letter comes out 12 days later. Actually, 11 working days if you include the weekends. So basically what Deputy AG Rosenstein did was he said, look, this is a serious question. Let's put it together. Let's put the heads together on everybody. Let's consider all the bits and pieces, not act rashly. And in 12 days, he puts together a letter which has key conclusions. 1, Comey refused to accept the nearly universal judgment that he was mistaken to go public in July. 2, he was wrong to usurp the Attorney General's authority to announce the case would be closed. 3, he ignored another long-standing principle: we do not hold press conferences to release derogatory information about the subject of a declined criminal investigation. That is, you said we're not going to prosecute, so you don't say anything bad about them as the principle. Instead, he laid out everything bad he could. This opinion is shared by multiple attorneys general across decades. Then he sent that letter to the president. The president now has a careful, deliberate review of the situation and immediately says, you're fired. President Trump has decided that his job is to drain the swamp. Pure and simple, drain the swamp. It's time for us to realize that this is one more step in draining the swamp. We have to have a law enforcement community that can be trusted. James Comey was out for James Comey. He could not be trusted. And now our president has acted in a way to restore trust. I'm Dr. Ted Noel. Thanks for listening.